trapped in my own bed, barely able to move. That's when my husband walked in and coldly announced that 12 of his extended family members were arriving to stay at our house for 2 weeks. When I begged him to postpone, he looked at me with complete indifference and said, "No one is waiting. Just do as I say." He expected me to cook, clean, and play the perfect hostess while my surgical incisions were still bleeding. I thought my life was about to become a living hell. But when those 12 relatives finally arrived, packed into 3 cars, everything changed. Their smiles faded the moment they looked past my husband and saw me. What happened next completely flipped our marriage on its head, exposed a web of jaw-dropping family secrets, and left my husband begging for mercy. Follow my story until the end to see the shocking twist. My name is Eliana Caldwell, and I am 42 years old. Just 5 days ago, I was lying on an operating table undergoing a brutal spinal fusion surgery. Now, I was back home, trapped in our bedroom, experiencing a level of physical agony I didn't know the human body could endure. Every tiny breath felt like a sharp blade twisting into my lower back. The surgical incisions were still raw, tightly bound under heavy bandages, and my doctor had given me strict, absolute orders. Total bed rest, zero lifting, and no physical exertion whatsoever. I was entirely dependent on my husband, Derek, for something as simple as a glass of water. But dependency on Derek was a dangerous place to be. That evening, the bedroom door clicked open. Derek walked in, completely ignoring the pale, sweating state I was in. Without a single hint of warmth, he dropped a bombshell that made my blood run cold. This Saturday, all 12 members of my extended family are staying at our house for 2 weeks, he announced casually. I stared at him, wondering if I was hallucinating from the pain medication. I begged him, my voice cracking, reminding him that I could barely sit up, let alone host a crowd. I pleaded with him to postpone the visit. Derek just looked down at me with absolute indifference, his jaw tightening into a familiar, cold mask. "No one is waiting," he replied sharply. "They've already booked their travel. Just do as I say." The next 48 hours were a blur of absolute despair and crushing physical exhaustion. While I lay completely immobilized in bed, listening to the agonizing tick of the wall clock, Derek went to work transforming our home into a grand hotel. He didn't lift a finger to help me adjust my pillows or bring me fresh ice packs. Instead, he spent every single hour pacing the hallways, barking orders over the phone, and inflating his own importance to his relatives. He was frantically preparing for their arrival, acting like a wealthy benefactor throwing a lavish festival while completely stepping over his broken, recovering wife. It was sickening. Before I tell you the twisted discovery I made next, or watching from, I truly love seeing how far my story travels. Now, as the Thursday afternoon light began to fade across the bed sheets, Derek left his laptop open on the kitchen island. Needing to drag myself up to use the restroom, I caught a glimpse of his email screen. My heart stopped. Derek had explicitly lied to his entire family. He had sent a massive group message framing this entire 2-week visit as a celebratory vacation that he was personally hosting. He claimed I was in perfect health and desperately wanted everyone here to show off my cooking. He was setting me up to fail. The roar of multiple car engines echoing up our quiet driveway signaled the beginning of my nightmare. Looking out the window, I watched 3 packed vehicles pull up, doors swinging open as a dozen of Derek's relatives spilled out onto the concrete. Derek rushed out the front door like a proud king, his face stretched into a theatrical, triumphant smile as he opened his arms wide to welcome his empire. He was entirely ready to show off our beautiful, pristine home and reap the rewards of being the ultimate, generous patriarch. Upstairs, a sudden fire ignited inside me. I refused to lie hidden in the dark like a dirty secret while he used me as a prop for his grand illusions. Gritting my teeth against the blinding white-hot flashes of agony shooting through my lower back, I forced my legs over the edge of the mattress. My hands gripped the cold metal handles of my walker as I slowly, agonizingly dragged myself toward the staircase. Every single step downward felt like my fresh surgical stitches were tearing apart. As I reached the landing, Derek noticed me. His proud smile instantly vanished, replaced by an expression of pure, unadulterated fury. He stepped forward quickly, positioning his body to block me from view, desperately trying to shield his lies. But it was already too late. His mother, his sister, and the rest of the 12 relatives looked past his shoulder and saw me standing there, pale as a ghost, trembling violently, and visibly stitched up. The joyful chatter in the foyer died instantly. The entire room went completely, hauntingly quiet as they stared at my broken frame in absolute horror. Eliana? Oh my God, what happened to you? Derek's sister, Clara, gasped, dropping her suitcases onto the floor. She rushed past my frozen husband, her eyes wide with panic as she reached out to steady my shaking hands. The massive web of deception Derek had spun instantly began to unravel right in front of us. His mother, Martha, stepped forward, pulling a printed copy of Derek's email from her purse. She demanded to know why I was using a walker when her son had explicitly promised them that I was in peak health, bursting with energy and thrilled to spend the next 2 weeks preparing grand, home-cooked feasts for the entire family. They had absolutely no clue that I had just undergone major spinal surgery. The shock in the room turned into a thick, suffocating anger as the family realized they had been weaponized against a recovering woman. Martha turned on Derek with a ferocity I had never witnessed before. She blasted him right there in the foyer, her voice echoing off the walls as she called his behavior utterly disgusting and shameful. The entire dynamic of the household shifted in a single heartbeat. Instead of acting like demanding, entitled guests expecting to be waited on hand and foot, the 12 relatives completely took over. Clara and Martha gently guided me back upstairs to my bed, making sure I was comfortable and heavily medicated. Downstairs, the rest of the family began moving furniture and organizing themselves, entirely ignoring Derek. My husband was left standing alone in his own living room, stripped of his pride and treated like an absolute pariah by the very bloodline he worshipped. As I lay resting in the quiet sanctuary of my bedroom, the muffled sound of shouting began to drift up through the floorboards. Curiosity overcame my exhaustion. I leaned closer to the bedroom door, straining to hear the furious confrontation exploding downstairs. It quickly became clear that Derek's elaborate stunt wasn't just driven by his usual arrogant need to show off. The truth was far more pathetic. He owed a massive, crippling financial debt to his eldest brother, Marcus, who was standing in our living room demanding answers. Derek had secretly engineered this entire 2-week family vacation as a desperate, expensive distraction to pacify his creditors and avoid a legal crisis. A soft knock on my door interrupted the shouting. Clara walked in quietly, carrying a warm tray of food, her face lined with deep embarrassment. She sat by my bedside and offered a sincere apology on behalf of the family, but then she revealed something that made my stomach churn. This wasn't Derek's first time manipulating the people around him. She confessed that Derek had a long, toxic history of using false appearances and financial deceit within the family bloodline and selfish illusions of grandeur. He had calculated that my silent compliance after surgery would keep his secrets safely hidden from the rest of the family. He fully expected me to suffer in silence, so he could maintain his hollow reputation. But his reckless gamble had completely backfired, and for the first time in his life, his hidden motives were entirely exposed. The next morning, the heavy silence in the house broke when Martha called everyone downstairs. The entire family had staged a formal, unyielding intervention in the living room. Derek sat isolated on the edge of the sofa, his usual commanding presence completely shattered as 12 pairs of eyes stared him down. Marcus stood at the center of the room, holding a stack of financial ledgers that detailed every single dollar Derek had hidden and owed. They forced my husband to face the crushing reality of his systematic cruelty toward his recovering wife and his deep financial deceit. With his own family completely backing me, Derek was utterly stripped of his arrogance and defenses. He looked over at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and desperation, but I offered him absolutely no sympathy. Marcus stepped forward and tossed a legally binding restructuring agreement onto the coffee table. Under the strict supervision of his mother and brother, Derek was forced to sign the papers, transferring control of his business assets to clear the family debt. More importantly, Martha ensured a binding clause was added that completely locked my name out of his liabilities, fully protecting my personal financial security from his reckless choices forever. The relatives stayed for the remaining 2 weeks, but they didn't expect a single thing from me. Instead, they spent their time cooking nutritious meals, managing the chores, and helping me safely heal from my intense surgery. While they nurtured my recovery, they also systematically packed Derek's bags. My husband was forced to stay in a nearby motel, entirely cast out of his own home. What was meticulously planned as a nightmare designed to break me ultimately became my absolute liberation. Now, I'm deeply curious about all of you who listened to my story until the very end. What would you have done if you discovered your spouse had lied to your entire family just to protect their own selfish reputation? Would you have confronted him in front of everyone like I did, or handled? Meanwhile, I am leaving 2 other incredible stories